Very good morning to you, and thank you all for coming. Thank you to BlackBerry for inviting me to come and share my thoughts on the future of how our world is going to be created by mobile communications. In a recent survey, when first asked, what's the first thing you notice about me, 61% of the respondents actually said, my mobile device. When you get to people under the age of 18, the first thing they notice about the people that they meet for the first time, 82% said it's their mobile device. Mobile devices are becoming the new Ferraris, the new prestige symbols of our networked world. And in fact, actually, we look at our mobile devices something like 150 times a day. And if you have a smartphone, smart device, that goes up to 200 times a day. So we're actually having quite an intimate relationship with these things. Facebook and Twitter said in 2012 that over 50% of their subscribers are in fact checking on their services via their mobile devices. And in Britain, in fact, the interaction with Twitter as a service, 80% of Twitter subscribers are using mobile devices. We actually see an incredible explosion of tablets, 140% increase over the period of a year, and 51% for smartphones. And I think this is really just the beginning. 80% of our entire world is in fact covered by a mobile network. And as you know, there are more mobile devices in the world than there are in fact people. This level of connectivity and interconnectivity is in fact unprecedented. This kind of brings me on to a slightly more serious question, which is we are living increasingly in a complex world. And the question is how do we deal with that complexity? How do we deal with the challenges in our personal lives? How do we deal with the challenges of running and managing our cities? How do we deal with the challenges of the climate that is changing around us? And how do we better manage the resources that we have available at us? It's an important question that we have to ask. So, with the rise of what I call the mobile society, what we see, in fact, is an incredible explosion of data and the interconnectivity of data with mobile devices. In 2004, I was talking about how refined data, and actually lots of it, was actually going to be transformative in our world. I described it as the black gold of the 21st century. And in fact, mobile data volume is going to increase up to 129.6 exabytes by 2016. We are going to move from talking about data mining to a world where deeper meaning is created through data. This is actually not a kind of reboot, it's kind of more of a system upgrade. We are actually programming and reprogramming our world to have a living, breathing ecosystem, a kind of form of consciousness which we're wrapping around the planet. This explosion of complexity and the interconnectedness of information is in fact restructuring our world. And it is restructuring it so that we are actually sort of engaging in a world that is going to be more conscious and more reflexive. It is blending our analog and digital worlds together to make a different type of reality. In fact, I think that we are all, and that means all humanity, are midwives to engineering and programming a different kind of consciousness. It's perhaps the beginning of what we call the consilience, or the unification of knowledge. And in fact, the architecture of the brain suggests that the future of knowledge resides in a different type of big. This new consciousness, this new sentience, in many ways, is going to be increasingly accessed via our mobile devices, where we're going to have a more sensory immersion in the world around us. And what we have to understand is that technology doesn't come out of nowhere. It is a human invention in the first place, and it succeeds or not to the extent it meets fundamental human needs. There is a deeper relationship between us and technology, like DNA, more intertwined than perhaps we often give credit for. So if we return to the idea of a greater knowledge, a big knowledge, a more sentient world, we can take that big intelligence and we can start to use that to organise our world at a higher order of complexity, transforming our physical world, even at a citywide level. So for example, in Rio, they're talking about dynamic intelligent data, which is interconnecting many of the city's data sources to draw deeper insight from this smarter city. To do that, it is going to improve transportation, public safety, healthcare, and the quality of everyday people's lives. This is really about machine-to-machine communications. And we predict that, in fact, there is going to be a 22-fold increase in machine-to-machine communications between now and 2016. And in Japan, they are pioneering a service which is called Robot for Personal Intelligent Transport System, designed for an increasingly aging Japanese population and people with physical disabilities. They are actually designed this system whereby elderly people, incapacitated people, can decide where they want to go in the city. They program in their destination, and then what happens is you get into your driverless vehicle and it takes you safely, without bumping into anything, to your destination. Sorry, this is not the right presentation, I'm afraid. There's some other stuff that I wanted to share, but never mind. If we think about the weather, increasingly climate model predictions state that we are going to see an increase in extreme climate events. And governments and NGOs around the world are increasingly being put under pressure to be able to deliver relief to vulnerable communities. And recently, here in the USA, with Hurricane Katrina and Hurricane Sandy, demonstrated that, in fact, relief services didn't have the full capacity to reach everyone in need. So the question is then, how could mobile communications be of service to those vulnerable communities? Well, Ushahidi is a crisis management platform. It's evolved a very sophisticated crisis management platform that enables the creation of maps which are time-stamped and geolocation-based, where people on the ground in an unfolding disaster situation can in fact start to share this knowledge, which can then be built into valuable insight and valuable knowledge, which is unfolding in near real time. It's the first time that actually this has been enabled to happen. And as we see, there are increasingly deployments of Ushahidi around the world. And in fact, after Haiti, the UN said that for the first time, meshed mobile communication networks allowed us to form a collective intelligence to be emergent as that crisis was unfolding. Essentially, this type of platform is dissolving complexity via peer-to-peer networks and organisation, mobile and data, into high-performance companies. And if we just stick with the humanitarian story for a little while longer, after the Rwandan crises, which we now describe as genocide, lots of data tells us, in fact, that prior to that event unfolding, there were huge spikes in the purchase of mobile phones, SIM cards, fuel, and a whole bunch of other things. And so the question is could we start to use data to start to predict conflicts? Could we collect data from a whole variety of different sources? Could we use machine learning algorithms to give us insight? Would we be able to visualize that and perhaps start to project that across regions? So no one else has seen this in the world to date. This has come out of the Cambridge University, and there's some very, very smart guys which are currently working on this type of platform, where only through big data and being able to access that data, refine that data, and pull it together, can they create a platform that can maybe help organisations better anticipate and reduce the final cost of conflict. And of course, we've also seen the use of mobile communications helping people on the ground to organise and coordinate against governments and institutions of power that they strongly disagree with. The Spanish government in 2004 was brought down when, after the Madrid bombings, the government blamed that on the ETA, the Basque separatists, ETA, as opposed to the real culprits, which were Al-Qaeda. Grassroots and viral, a text message campaign was sent out, the government lied, passed it on. Within 48 hours, as that general election was being called to vote, Aznar, who was then the president expected to have a landslide victory, was swept from power. We've seen President Obama here in the US also really successfully use mobile coordinations to organise a volunteer and grassroots team of people to help them get into the White House twice in a row. So the question we have to ask ourselves then is, how could mobile communications help us create better civic infrastructures and run better, more adaptive, flexible government than previously thought? Healthcare is one of the biggest costs to any society. And as we're an ageing population, we're placing more and more strain on our healthcare services. So the question is how could we perhaps address that in a way that could fundamentally change the way that we think about healthcare? Well, healthcare is essentially about data. The right data being in the right place at the right time that enables people to make the right diagnosis, to make the right decisions. And Patients Knows Best is a platform designed specifically around that insight. Essentially, for the very first time, an entire patient's clinical data is available not only to the patient, but to a clinical team. They are actually learning together. They are working together to get better insight into that particular patient's chronic healthcare problems. And because, in fact, this system is dynamic and that data is being constantly updated, it offers actually a far better management and diagnosis of that clinical, the problems of that particular patient. So what we find therefore actually is that sharing data increases safety. It actually really does enable to evolve a very different type of healthcare, and it certainly saves clinical time. Another challenge we've got is obesity. It's a big challenge. So how in fact do we try and persuade people to lead slightly healthier lives? Well, in fact, Nike Fuel and Fitbit are in fact gamifying this idea of living a different type of healthy life. Gamification is essentially the psychology of human motivation. And there's another company which I think is very interesting, where they are creating what they call smart playgrounds. Their playgrounds are designed to encourage children to exercise more. So whilst they're in the playgrounds, the more they exercise on these machines, they get rewarded instantly with sounds and colours. But in fact what happens is that kinetic energy is transferred into a child's personal data currency. When they go home, they can actually take that currency and turn it into something that they can use to play online. So there's a really interesting blending between the physical world and the world that our children are also living in, which is totally and utterly online. There is a report that says that we could save $400 billion from the OECD countries' healthcare if we started to use mobile health and e-health services. Another issue is literacy. 1 in 5 people on this planet is still illiterate, and 2/3 of those are women. And if we continue at this current pace, even by 2016, 700 million people are still going to be illiterate. So the question is how can we get the books, the knowledge, the inspiration, and the opportunity into the hands of these people today? Well, we do that through e-books and e-readers and e-mobile services. World Reader is actually supplying Kindles to school children in Africa. They come with 3,500 books at their disposal, and within 60 seconds they have another 700,000 titles that they actually could get access to. And because the distribution system is GSM based, it means that the cost of distribution are near to zero. It is in fact estimated that if we started to increase the use of e-readers in this way, by 2017 we could get many more millions of children into literacy and give them a greater chance in life. Of course, as we sort of move from what I call a linear world into a non-linear world, we need different types of tools. There comes a point where institutions and the types of tools that we use are no longer relevant for the world that we live in today. Hence this child looking at these once upon a time heavily used instruments which are now in the display cases of the museum. Who would have imagined that when YouTube was born in 2005 that they would now be funding over 100 commercial companies on their platform between $2 to $5 million each? And when we ask what is media today, I would say it's networked, it's participatory, it's multi-platform, and it's definitely data-driven. I think we're watching the death of broadcast as we know it, and the financial and business models which have in fact underpinned it. Google says that in fact, you know, this is a place, TV, where we're going to need search. And they believe in fact that our entire kind of media experience is going to be driven through applications. The BBC, as you know, have this thing called the iPlayer. And the iPlayer is available on every single mobile device that is available to us in the UK. They have seen a 30% increase in their viewing figures by people being able to take their information, their stories, the things they want to watch everywhere with them. It's really quite remarkable. And there's a prediction that by 2015 the amount of physical goods sold through what we call social media and social network platforms is going to rise to $30 billion, and I think in fact it could well be more. Thinking about banking and finance, we see a world where increasingly we are also much happier to bank through our mobile devices. Here, a little graph that's showing actually, even in the US, there is a steady rise of people using their mobile devices for banking. And I think it's actually something that the banking institutions aren't really following at the speed they should. And therein lies a problem. Because in the same way that I think that we've seen broadcast and journalism media, although now maybe kind of more up to speed with the changes that digital and technological sort of revolution has brought, have opened a space for other people to come along and perhaps disrupt them. In Kenya, 37% of the entire population gets their monthly salary paid into their mobile account via a thing called M-Pesa. And it could well be that we even start to think about crowdfunding, a way of financing which is going to fundamentally change the way that we think of how money flows and works in this world. If we return to our cities, we are increasingly seeing that our cities and our urban landscapes are being sprayed with what I would call digital graffiti. These are tags and comments and pictures and videos. Some of this is personal information, and some of this is in fact subversive. And through our mobile devices, this digital information is going to become increasingly visible to us. This is going to change business models, and it is in fact going to even perhaps disrupt the way that we think of our legal frameworks. But we're seeing new value being created through this. In English, the word to learn comes from the word leorin, and that is connected to a German word which is actually about finding a path, a new path. So maybe through our mobile devices we're able to navigate this world and our cities in a very different type of way. So we're given the opportunity to discover, we're given the opportunity to create reputations, to think about community and commerce in very different types of ways, and Pinwheel is a good example of that. It is the dance of influence synchronizing with society. Here actually we can learn where you can get the best cheap Middle Eastern lunch outside of Damascus, but also we can leave context and our history for other people to come across. And so maybe in the not too distant future we could walk in the shoes of other people in urban landscapes and see the world through their eyes as opposed to seeing it through our own. And that could be a good thing. In this world, which I think is going to be more conscious and more sentient, which is actually going to be more blended in many ways, we're going to increasingly feel at home with this augmented world. So it's kind of summing up for you. I think that mobile communications and the future of our mobile communications world is going to fundamentally reshape it. It's going to enable us to evolve different types of trading models. It's going to allow us to think about different types of capabilities and performance of organisations. For example, as I showed in healthcare, for example, or crisis management, or thinking very differently about the nature of our commercial world. It's going to redefine individual sovereignty and our relationship to the world around us. It's going to redefine how we think about government and the services that governments deliver and how they're going to be created. Perhaps by 2020 we overcome what I call data fear. Right now, I think many people, and if we were to have a discussion in this room about your relationship to data and how you feel about it in this interconnected world, would generate, I think, a very stimulating and vibrant conversation. So we have to get over the fact that we are really only going to be able to truly transform our world if we embrace and work with data. But therefore we have to think very wisely about how that data is going to work and how it's going to be used. And we all are very sensitive about that. I think the Internet of Things does contribute to a more regenerative society. This idea of what we're talking about as smart cities is actually very important in terms of contributing to how we perhaps are going to better manage the scarce resources that we have on this planet. And I think cloud computing is a fundamental part of generating this kind of living, breathing ecosystem that is going to support this world which is going to be transformed through mobile communications. I do think our smart devices will make the world more intimate in a whole variety of different ways. This level of connectivity, I think, is genuinely unprecedented. So more intimacy with ourselves, but more intimacy with the world around us, with the environments that we are living in and we are creating. We're kind of blending to them in a very interesting way. And I think without data, we are in fact, as a friend of mine says, naked. We become naked without data. And that's why I go back to the idea of the relationship between us as human beings and technology is more intimately intertwined than we anticipate or understand. But big data does bring big information, but it also brings a great responsibility, and that's something very important for us to consider. I think there's a huge opportunity. We have the means to transform our world, to be more resilient, to be more relevant to us as individuals, and to be more socially cohesive. I think it can create a more sustainable world that is also economically vibrant through the tools and the capabilities and language that we have at our fingertips. So the challenge therefore is are we ready and able to thrive in what I call a non-linear world? Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much.